This video is about how to fabricate brackets to install aftermarket driving lights on your Celica GT or GTS 7th generation. I've always wanted to improve the low beam lighting, but the driving lights, I couldn't find any options other than the original and aftermarkets of the original. So what I did was I came up with an idea to fabricate just some aluminum brackets, and that way I could install some aftermarket driving lights. So what I'm going to do is I'll take these off of here and show you how I made them so that you can make your own. This is what they look like mounted to the brackets. This is the left hand side, just to give you a visual of what it is. Notice they need to be kind of far back, at least for this type of light, because it'll hit right there. And that's why I ended up going to a 2-inch unit. This is for the right hand side. The power steering cooler tubing lines are right there. Talk about light options. This is one that I bought on Amazon for a whopping $12. It's a spotlight. That's what I want. You can actually tell the spotlight, see how it's got smooth reflectors in there, where this is an off-road one that I have that is really wide, and it's got all these reflectors to set it off. It's a floodlight. Puts the light off in all kinds of directions. So this light puts out pretty good light. It's 18 watts. The stock bulbs are 55 watts. So by switching over to LED, you're going to lessen the wear and tear on your alternator. You're going to gain a little bit of horsepower because there'll be less draw in motor. That's 6 amps if you're using these. These are normally intended to be mounted the other way. There's a little gap around there, so I filled it in with silicone so that water wouldn't puddle in there. There are some other lights on Amazon that look like they projected a better light, but they had some really bad reviews for water intrusion and just longevity, and they were $80, and they were also DOT approved. For you, those of you in Europe, that's kind of like your MOT. So I figured for $12 I'd give these a shot. It's more of a spotlight. I mean, ideally a driving light is kind of wide. So I've already had these connected, and they are pretty focused, and it is bright, and it puts off a little bit of light everywhere, where the stock driving lights don't really do that. They're a little more focused. So they put a little bit of glare when you're looking at them, but it's not too bad. What I did, this is my first prototype, bunch of holes, and this was a notch for that bracket on there. Originally I put it in the wrong direction, didn't realize it. So this was my second attempt, and so it goes like this, because you need to get the bracket up as high as possible. So the back of the bumper is right here, and there's on both sides there's a piece of metal above this, so you can't go up very high. You want to go up a decent height, because at least on this you've got about an inch between the mounting and the light, and that puts it in there and the right centering vertically. So you want to get this thing up there, but you can't go too high. This piece is for the right side, and it was relatively simple. The left side, there is the power steering cooler lines come in right here. So I had to go cut a notch out of there, and one of the things is that, on this one here, I'm trying to line the light up. This line here is the actual center line based on the OEM lights, and when I put them in, I put it off the side, partly because on the power steering side it couldn't really go over much further because of those cooling lines. The other issue is that my bumper cover, and there's obviously different bumper covers, mine is not symmetrical. So the center line is actually kind of ambiguous with it. And the side that's on, in this instance, on this side is flatter, and the other side's kind of at an angle. So it actually is better to be over a little bit. If you have a different bumper cover, you might want the actual center. I'll give you the dimensions on that in a second. So this angle, it's a 26-degree angle, the way it's sitting in the vehicle. So if you had a line, and that's how I did this one here, was the center of the OEM light is here, and I just extended it out. So this piece of metal, I started out with, is 1 inch by 2 inch metric. That's 2.5 centimeters by 5 centimeters. The width is 5.5 inches or 12 centimeters, and it's much easier to do this whole thing in metric system than it is in fractional, because for one, it's a metric vehicle. And these holes, okay, the next thing, these holes are exactly 10 centimeters apart. So this piece of metal is 3/16 thick. When I increased it out to 2 inches, my first prototype was only 1.5 inches. When I increased it out to 2 inches, I went to a thicker piece of metal. I happen to have this metal here, and so I cut it down with a saw to get this down to 1 inch. I didn't see a whole lot of options online for stock aluminum this size. And there's a place here in San Diego called Industrial Metal Supply, and they've got a great supply of stuff, and they don't have this dimension either. There's one on Amazon that does, but it's got a rounded edges on here because it was like meant to be mounted flush onto a surface. So what that ends up doing is making a sharp edge here, and I've already kind of rounded this down a little bit, and there's one spot I need to do a little more because the wire's hitting it. So there's no real benefit to having that sharp edge there. And if I did anything, I want to knock it down so that if a wire or just me working in there don't get cut on it. So that was one of the things that I had to do after cutting everything down, was hit it with a file, and I've got a bench belt sander just to knock off the edges. So how I made this, so as I mentioned, these holes are 10 centimeters apart, and they really need to be mounted up there as close as possible. So what I did was measured 2 centimeters in, and then used my automatic center punch to mark the spot there. And then after that spot, I made the divot there. Then I measured over 10 centimeters. These, especially because I cut them myself, they're not exactly identical size. They're not exactly the 140, and they don't need to be. It's just that this distance needs to be that, and then the other hole that you're going to drill is relative to this hole. It's not relative to the edge. So put this down there, mark my spot, use the with automatic center punch, use the small pilot bit to get the hole going, put in a larger bit to get it to the right size, and then it comes on to this part of drilling the mounting hole. So this line, this is the actual center line, and that, what I did is I measured it off relative to this. So there's this hole, and then that line gets extended out here. This hole I did at 27 millimeters, or I'm sorry, 22 millimeters between here, the hole, and the line that's relative to the mounting point. This line intersects at 27 millimeters. So if you were to want to do that, you could do that. But the problem was when over here, when I did the power steering cutout, I could see ahead of time that it was going to be a problem. But for my lights, it doesn't really matter at all, because they fit in there nice to where they're at. They don't have to be centered. And if they were centered, it would be centered off of that extra area going up off at an angle, so it wouldn't even really look right. The other thing is, with these lights, inside here, there's an Allen bolt. And you have to disassemble these pieces off of here, unfortunately, to get at it. But so you can loosen that Allen bolt, and you can move this thing from left to right. So in the case of this one here, I put it there, and I had to put the hole there because of the power steering line, but I could move this over if I wanted to. So to that point, with this type of light, getting this hole perfect doesn't really matter because you can always adjust it by moving that. The other light that I looked at, it had like a metal hoop and there was no adjustment to it, so it might be a little more critical on that. You're going to need hardware to fasten it to the bumper, preferably stainless steel. So you're going to need 4 bolts that are 6 millimeter by about 16 millimeter. These are a little short. Longer would be better probably. They don't cover the entire bolt unless I really crank the thing down there. Or a 1/4 inch by 5/8. Let's see. Oh, and the other thing is that the holes on the bumper, one of them is elongated. So if you don't get this exactly 100 millimeters, it doesn't matter because you've got some play in there. So you don't really have to worry about that. Yeah, so that's 27 from there to there. Oh, and the measurement I forgot. This is 10 millimeter from back to there. There's plenty of room behind the bumper up in that area to where if you had even a larger piece of aluminum, it would be fine and it could move back further. And depending on what lights you got, it could prevent that from interfering with the bumper. But these ones fit really nice. The stock bowls and the aftermarket ones that I found or purchased, the polarity was backwards. And I verified. I've got the Toyota manual with the wiring diagram, and you can tell by the colors of the thing that it's this thing that's backwards. So when I first connected it, the light didn't work because the LEDs polarized, and the other ones don't care about polarity. So the way to fix that is all these Toyota connectors, or almost all of them, they can be disassembled. So if you break the connector, which is really common when they get old and brittle, you can order a new connector, and then instead of cutting wires and putting splices on there, soldering anything together, what you can do is simply remove the plastic connector portion of this and then only replace the connector and leave the stock wiring. So in this case, there's a little line or a plastic divider in there, and that comes out. And what that does is it holds down some other little plastic clips that are holding the metal tabs in. So now this is out, and if you look down in there, you get a nice little pick like this. You can see a piece of plastic, and you get that under there, and you pull this out, and then that way you can switch it from one to the other, like right there. So I've already switched this one, so I don't need to switch it. So that's how you disassemble this connector and almost all the Toyota connectors. I replaced a cruise control connector on my Celica, and it got it from AliExpress, and that's where vendors that sell stuff on Amazon and eBay, that's where they go to buy it. So I bought it on AliExpress for $1, and it got here in less than 2 weeks and it worked great. So you can replace almost all the connectors, and so you can hear that snap in. So then put that back in there, and then where's all this plastic? You put this back in place, and that will hold the plastic down so that won't ever come out. So you can either use this is like an old connector from one of the driving lights that I had, or you can buy this pigtail. I'm going to put some part numbers on the screen from that I found. A couple of them are Toyota part numbers, but it's what was listed on AliExpress. This video isn't intended to be a review of the lights that I purchased. It's about making the brackets and providing you with some options. But I thought that you'd want to see what the outcome looked like. I took photos of the OEM driving lights and the LEDs with the low beam lights covered for comparison. I think I have the LED lights aimed a little bit low. My concern was glare for other drivers and coming the other way. So I walked in front of the vehicle, and there's a glare if you look at the bulbs, but you just don't look at the bulbs when you're driving the other way. So I don't think the glare is really an issue. I went for a drive, and it seemed fine. So I think I can raise them up a little bit. They're definitely more focused in the center. And then there's a general light everywhere else around the outside, which a lot of it's just going up into space wasted. But it was really helpful on signs and just seeing to the left and to the right. And you can see that from these two photos where the LEDs are lit up a lot more on the left and the right. The other factor in this is that the color temperature difference. The LEDs are around 6,000 Kelvin. They're a bright white, where the OEMs are probably between 3,000 and 4,000. And the brighter white is great when conditions are clear, but if you're in snow or rain or dust, it reflects off of that more, and this becomes more of an obstruction. That's why fog lights are a real low temperature. So the OEM bulbs would probably be more helpful if you're in those types of conditions. It never snows at the beach. It rains a little bit, and we get fog, and that's about it. So I wouldn't use them with some fog. Other than that, they look real good. I'm going to use this for a little while and then see how they look on a 2-lane road. And that's really where I needed improvement, where you have to have your low beams on. There's cars coming the other way. They got really bright lights. And so I needed something in really that circumstance. So I need to go test drive that. But it looks good. Like and subscribe.